Good evening, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Carrie Damon. I'm from the Education Department here at Mars. I'm going to do a couple announcements before announcing our speaker tonight, Ryan Poissant, who's going to be talking about distribution. We have a couple of events coming up. Actually, one is tomorrow, Mars Best Practices on B2B Sales Strategy Insider Tips. We planned this to be a sort of a follow-on to last week's lecture because we know there's not a lot of time to talk about B2B sales. So this will go more in depth, and it's a 90-minute presentation, or 90 minutes for the whole thing, so there's lots of time to ask questions. There's still time to register. If you go to marsdd.com/bestpractices if you're interested, that promises to be a really great session. We also have next week our final Meet the Entrepreneurs. So those of you who've been following and you're from the life sciences sector, sorry that you were put last, but well, maybe put you first or second next year. We have 3 companies coming: Quantum Dental Technologies, Newtopia, and Eve Medical. Eve Medical actually was one of our winners in the Upstart competition last year. So it'll be great to see what's happened to them since they won last year. Again, the time is a little bit different. It's from 6 to 7:30 to allow lots of time for questions from each of the panelists, and it's followed by a networking session. And we have a big announcement that the Upstart competitors the list of the final 10 has been finalized. Are any of them in the room right now? So can we give a big round of applause for our... So congratulations. It was a really stiff competition this year. We had over 40 applicants, which is most ever, and up a lot from last year. So we're really excited about this year's competition. I'm going to say their names, and if you're here, if you want to stand up, I apologize because my phonics has never been good. So if I get it wrong, it's not your name, it's me. Kimatria, Lumasonics. Oh, great. Epilogger, no. Casero, Flyer Flow, Life Bike, no. TorontoDance.com, there you are. Fungea, there you go. I'm not going to get this one. Libertique, oh, did I get it? Sort of. And Walk Safe. So we had about seven of you here. So the competition is in May, and we encourage everybody to come because you'll get so excited by the creativity and the great businesses that have been growing over the course of the year, and we've got some great companies that will be presenting. So, and then lastly, the networking group that's been going the last couple weeks, again, they will be meeting at the end of this tonight's lecture at the bottom of the escalators. I think we should give the group a name. So Ryan Poissant, so he is new to Mars and came in the last year, and this is his first Entrepreneurship 101 lecture, so we're very excited to have him. He told me not to read his whole bio, so I'll try to keep it short. But Ryan brings over 12 years of experience working with technology companies. He's worked 1 tech startup, 1 non-for-profit, 2 turnarounds, 2 growth stories, and a multinational. Most recently, he was Vice President of Marketing and Business Development, leading the post-acquisition turnaround of Customer One, an enterprise software company in the CRM space. Something he's also proud of is that he was part of the leadership team that built the Framework Foundation, a national nonprofit organization that promotes volunteerism and community involvement through its Time Raiser and Civic Footprint programs. And he's also served on the board for the last 5 years. He's a graduate of the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario, and he lives in Toronto with his wife and son. So welcome, Ryan.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Carrie, for that very kind and generous introduction. It is amazing to see so many faces sitting here when there is so much sunshine out there. So there are a couple of things that really means. One is the bar has been raised, and I better make sure that you all learn something tonight because you took time out of a really great day to come be with us instead of being on a patio. 2 is that speaks to the level of passion, enthusiasm, ideas, and overall drive that exists within the startup community that you guys are all now kind of becoming a part of through E101. It is fascinating to see so many ideas coming up, some of the upstart companies that we talked about that are getting in. These are just wonderful for us at Mars. We love people who have passion and ideas and the willingness to kind of go out and do something about them as opposed to sort of wondering what if. So thank you very much. One other thing I'd like to point out, I was at a conference recently and the sort of traditional admin came out and said, everyone please turn your phones off and be polite to the speaker. And the speaker came out and he said, you know what, we live in a world where you don't actually have 100% of anybody's attention span anyways, so feel free to keep the phones powered up, feel free to tweet, feel free to send me a message and tell me you completely disagree with my last comment. I'll get it later, we'll have a little laugh between the two of us, it'll be great. But by all means, play Angry Birds if you like, it's good. Distribution. So our old friend, the 4 Ps, and this is covered quite extensively in E101. Product, price, place, promotion. It's great that it's an alliteration that they all start with P, that we've been able to come up with these 4 things that we can remember. They're all elements that we kind of focus on one at a time, but they're actually very much intertwined, and we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. When you kind of break it down, the 4 Ps of price, promotion, distribution, and I'm missing one. Somehow product slipped off there in the transforming of the slides, but trust me, there's a product, that's the other P. We're really focusing in on what is it that we're making, what are we offering to the product. The price is something that we need to be able to get right in order to help our customer figure out their buyer choice rejection kind of process. Promotion is what are we going to tell the world about this that's going to get them interested and help them understand our product. But distribution or place is one of the more critical ones because there's a lot of choices to make as we're going to go through in tonight's presentation and sort of talk to you about the implications of those choices and how they kind of impact your overall offering. The 3 key things around distribution are delivery, sales, and service. So delivery is how you're going to get it to where it is that somebody's going to be able to take advantage of it. That product, is it going to be, whether it's, you're selling sweet goods to a bakery or you're manufacturing electronics on one side of the world and you need to get them to a market on the other side of the world, how is it going to get there? The other part is sales. So once we've got it there, how are we going to talk to the customer and help the customer understand what it is that we have on offer, what the value is in what we're offering them, and really help them make an educated decision as to whether or not they'd like to buy. And then after that, there's this whole element of post-purchase that's called service or support. So the relationship doesn't always end with a transaction. Oftentimes we've got a broader sort of view on this, and we'd like to take somebody who's purchased something from us and keep them happy throughout the duration of their engagement. So there's really kind of 2 flavors, and you'll recognize these pretty quickly. But if I was to say, an iPad, there are really 2 ways you can go about doing that. Apple took, both approaches. It's kind of okay to mix them both. But you take a look at the top photo, and that is a picture of the Apple Store. Well, Apple manufactures these. They put them through their distribution network, which is their stores. They have their sales folks that are educating you on what an iPad does and why it's great and answering all your questions. And if you have a problem, then you go back to the Apple Store, and they take care of things. That is a direct channel. There is nothing between Apple and the customer that's making that purchase decision. It is direct engagement between Apple and their customer. Now, I can also get an iPad if I go over to Best Buy. I can go through one of their stores. These people seem to be waiting in line in the rain, possibly for an iPad 3, who knows? And I can also purchase an Apple product there. But Apple has pushed that through the inventory of Best Buy, which has then put it out to their stores, and I can still consume that product. But there is, between Apple and the consumer, there is Best Buy. That's an indirect channel. Channels come in sort of online, offline flavors. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the basic concept between direct and indirect is there anything between you and the customer? Which one to choose? Now, I'd said that, mix and match as you will, but there's a number of different variables that you want to take into account when you're trying to figure out, which way do we take on this fork in the road? One of them is sort of market type. So 3 very disparate images here representing existing, resegmented, and new markets. So we're going to start with the red Ferrari. That is an existing market, sports cars. Ferrari every year sits down and they say, okay, what have we done in the past that really works for us, and how are we going to compete in this market for our customer? But they know really intimately what the rules of engagement are within that market. They know that it's about horsepower, they know that it's about handling, they know that it's about having great reviews and slick designs, and they're competing with the Maseratis and the Aston Martins of the world. This is all known. It's a bit of a mature market in that the criteria for winning are fairly well recognized by all the people that are in that market. They know how customers think and what customers like. Now, if we take a look at the picture of this floating biplane, this is a resegmented market. So there's a market already for planes, personal planes, a four-seater that fits in a hangar and people buy through certain things. There's a market for float planes for people that fish. This is sort of a hybrid of those things, and that you can fold those wings down and put it in a garage. It can get you to the cottage, and you don't need to have a hangar at a landing strip somewhere. It is what we would sort of refer to as a resegmented market. We know a little bit about how float planes work. We know a little bit about how airplanes work. Some of that stuff is already known, but we're targeting a new customer probably at a different price point with a bit of a different value proposition. And so those things are what we would call sort of a resegmented or sort of middle of the road. Now, a new market, if you take a look at the other photo, we've got somebody on a Segway. When Segways came out, I'm sure the Segway people stood around and said, well, it's kind of interesting. Will somebody buy it online? Will somebody buy it at a car dealership? Should we put it next to a really cool riding lawnmower in the John Deere store because it's kind of got two wheels and it needs some service afterwards? They would have had to figure out the unknown elements of this is the product offering, but we don't know what our consumers are going to want. We can focus and test group a few things, but it's all brand new territory. We don't have lots of data to look at. So the market types generally kind of fall neatly into existing or new, and then somewhere in the middle we've got this sort of resegmented, repurposed combinations kind of world. The other piece is the market stage. So when PCs first came out, the Apple II was fantastic. It was a keyboard, had some word processing skills. There was a TV plopped on top. You could do some interesting things with it. It was really advanced technology, early stage when PCs first started. Since then, we've sort of all come to understand through all the years that we've had PCs what it is that we make buying decisions on for PCs. So, we've got an Apple MacBook up in the top corner, and that is around processor speed and how many gigabiggles of RAM do we have and all those good things. But we're kind of known because as the market evolved, it matured. And then we've got even sort of the next step of that, which is the tablet. So we've moved sort of from this first computer probably had 20 megs of hard drive storage, and that was like unbelievable, right through to the things that you can do now on a tablet that we couldn't even imagine. So the market stage, whether it's early or developing or sort of mature, really also has an impact on the channels that you're going to choose to avail yourself of. The other piece is complexity. So I'm using a lot of Apple examples tonight, but they tend to do a lot of things well, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well when we get to the case studies. But for those of you who sort of bought an iPod or an iPhone when it first came out, I don't know if you sort of noticed the same sort of experience, but it was almost clinical in unwrapping that thing. It was very clean, it was very slick, it was very much like a doctor opening a piece of material that would be used in a surgery. You almost wanted to scrub in. That's how clean and simple it was. And about 4 minutes after you took it out of the box, you played with everything and you knew how everything kind of worked because there was only 3 or 4 things to play with. It was really simple, and you said, okay, when I hit the menu button, it goes back up, and when I scroll to the left, it goes that way, and when I scroll to the right, it goes that way. And you could kind of figure it out. That's really simple, and it was designed that way intentionally. But that's part of what you need to take into account when you're figuring out channels is how simple or complex is my product. On the other end of the scale, anybody who's taken, to trying to develop a home end stereo that's got a receiver and a DVD player and it's hooked up to your TV, and we've got front channels and back channels and your subwoofer, and then we got to figure out, do we use an HDMI all the way around, or am I going to go with S-video, or maybe just some good old-fashioned RCA cable? That's got some complexity to it. I need to kind of understand a few things before I can put this bad boy together and get it to kind of function the way I want to, right? Again, things that you're going to want to take into account. The other piece is price. How expensive is it? How much does it cost? How much margin is it? Will dictate what your options kind of are to be in a channel or not in a channel. The other piece, and this is where really good market research and a lot of trial and error comes in, is customer preference. What are people willing to do? Back to our Segway example. They had to do a lot of things in order to figure out how will somebody buy a Segway. It kind of makes sense to us selling them to do it this way, but will our customers respond? We have to understand their preferences and see how they react. If you take all those and you kind of put them together, you've got sort of the direct and indirect as we were talking. there's some default choices, some sort of, as you kind of look at the spectrum here, there's things that kind of naturally fall in. Well, a direct market tends to work better when you've got something that's a new product. When it's something that people don't understand and there's some education and awareness that really needs to be driven, direct kind of seems to make more sense. When you've got an existing kind of channel where the rules of engagement are known, the preferences are known, you can really wrap your arms around why somebody makes a purchase decision, then you've got options there for indirect. Somebody else can do the education piece for you traditionally. Somebody else can help you with the sales kind of piece. You don't need to own that relationship as closely to you. Resegmented falls somewhere on that spectrum. Market stage, if it's early, again, it's similar to having a new market. If the product itself is new and there's just not a lot of understanding around where it's going and what the criteria are going to be, it's better to have that relationship in a direct kind of way. If it's a mature market, such as something that is sort of fully developed and there's a lot of awareness around it and there's really an understanding of what it is, then indirect becomes an option. Complexity, same kind of thing. Where you've got more complexity, having that relationship where there's nothing between you and the customer has a lot of value because you can help ensure that your message gets carried out. Whether that's in the delivery aspect of it, in the sales at the point of sale, and the ongoing support, you really want that to kind of be one of the things that you hold near and dear to your heart and you don't get it lost in a channel with somebody else trying to deliver a message that's complex. Conversely, if things are simple, it could be that you can educate the people at Best Buy and they would be able to sell it on your behalf. The last bit is kind of price. So where things are really expensive, there's generally a very big value to having that person as a customer. Think about the value of something that's a very large purchase. You'd like to have that direct relationship be owned because there's an opportunity to potentially grow that in a number of different ways. Where something is cheap, and these aren't great corollaries of exact sort of scales, but where something is less expensive, then there's less of a desire, generally speaking, to pull them in and have that customer relationship. You can let that go and just focus on the things that you do really well and let somebody else in your channel or another indirect kind of partner help you with that. Now, somebody in here, probably an accountant, is saying, well, you put the Ferrari under the same thing as the cheap. That doesn't make sense. This is not necessarily meant to be read vertically, as in if you have a direct channel, then these are the only ways that it work. But if you're looking at direct versus indirect, these are sort of examples on these different criteria of how that would all go together. All right. Other factors that you want to take into account. Well, the size of market. If you're going after a very small market, then that might limit the amount of channels and the types of combinations you would have to you. The diversity and complexity of the market. If there's sort of one known type of buyer and you just need to reach that buyer, that's a lot different than in the marketplace. There are a whole bunch of people that use this product or solution or service for multiple things. If you have multiple buyers or key target segments that you're trying to service. Proximity to the market. If you're trying to reach a foreign market and you're actually manufacturing locally, you've got to take that into account in terms of what is cost prohibitive and what isn't. If you're selling things around the corner, then that's a little different as well. Completeness of offerings. So are you part of a solution or are you the whole solution? So back to sort of, are you selling RCA cables for stereos or are you actually selling an iPod, which is a whole solution in a box? The cost of the channel, so again, some of these things will naturally fold out, and then the speed to market. Sometimes a channel strategy, you look at it and it sounds great on a whole bunch of dimensions, but you look at it and say, my ability to really feel comfortable that these people, I can educate them and get this product pushed through their pipeline and have them carry the message to bring it to market is going to be a long lag time or a delay, and maybe that's something you need to take into account before deciding that ultimately that's the right move for you. So that's a little bit of the academic kind of stuff. Let's get into the more fun stuff. This is not just a tactic. We talked about the fact that these elements are really intertwined: product, price, place, and promotion. To some of the best companies, these are a strategy. And I want to talk to you about 3 specific examples. So we're going to start with Amazon. The folks at Amazon, way back when, sat around and said, do you think somebody would buy a book without actually picking it up in a store? Like they could hear about it from their friend or maybe kind of read something and then they'd just go online and feel comfortable ordering it. And that's where they kind of said, maybe there's something about this convenience that we might be onto something here. Maybe we can change the whole way books kind of get distributed, so I don't have to go into a physical location. I can actually use an online channel and fulfill it that way. And enough people actually said, yeah, you know what, that's a good idea. We will order our books online. We're comfortable with that. A book is something that I don't actually need to touch before I'm willing to make a purchase decision. So Amazon took that, and then they took it a couple of steps farther where they leveraged distribution. If anybody is familiar with this company and this process, are you familiar with the term the one-click checkout? So again, with convenience. So not only is it convenient enough that I can get it for you from the comfort of your own home, hell, you don't have to click 6 times. We'll just make it one click, and you can get it out of there in a flash. Again, things that they were able to do and streamline in their process, but it was because they had chosen this as a distribution strategy. This is one of my favorite ones that Amazon does, which is you get to a point where you've ordered the book that you want, and then they flash that message that says, if you spend another $13.48, we'll ship it to you for free. And you weren't even planning to buy any more, but you're looking around and they give you the recommendations engine and say, people who bought this, kind of like that. And so you end up buying another book to get the free shipping, so you spent more money than you're actually with. That's a great tactic for upsell that is enabled by the fact that they've built this around a distribution channel. Now, if you look at Amazon, in addition to all the great things they do on the customer side of things, what they really are is an optimized logistics kind of play. Amazon can get a product from a manufacturer, such as a book publisher or the other things that they've expanded into, from point A to point B in the most efficient manner with the least number of touches, so they keep their costs down. But that's because of, again, really investing in their distribution kind of strategies. Now, that's Amazon. Dell. Dell is a very, very popular case study that they teach at pretty much all business schools these days. You've probably heard the story. Boy starts computer company in dorm room. Boy revolutionizes computer industry. Boy becomes gajillionaire, right? But when you think about it, they turned the way PCs are consumed on its head. Michael Dell changed the paradigm. It used to be that HP and IBM would make computer, ship computer, sell computer. Michael Dell said, why don't I sell computer, make computer, ship computer? I get the money first. We sell something that exactly what people want. We have no inventory. I don't have to put inventory and stock throughout a whole distribution channel. This kind of makes sense. And it was radically different thinking, and it worked out. And that was all because of the approach that they took to leveraging options within distribution. The last one's Apple, and I've kind of touched a lot on Apple. But when Apple sort of launched the Apple Store, what they were thinking is they want to expand beyond a transaction. They want to own a relationship with you, and they want to delight you at every chance they get. So whether you order something online, you go into an Apple Store, you can bring it back there, you can talk to somebody, you want to play with something, they have it all out of the box and unwrapped and ready to go. You have a problem with it, they have a lot of people there, like not just 1 or 2 people kind of wandering around. They have so many people there that sometimes they outnumber the customers with the customer service reps there. And they say, yeah, no problem, we can fix that for you. Because they want that experience. They keep that relationship with you, and they use that to promote them, and you're not really buying a product, you're opting into an experience that they really hope will translate into loyalty and the ability to sell you more products as you go. So those are sort of 3 high-level, big name kind of examples. Let's delve into a bit of a case study with a few more details. Anybody recognize this? Hey, we got nice. Somebody's keen. I got a couple of heads nodding up and down. Espresso. This is indeed an espresso machine, and those are coffee pods. Now, this is a very interesting story. One that you think, well, nowadays, they're all everywhere. But it was very interesting to learn. They invented this in 1970. CBC was still broadcasting in black and white, I think, for the most part. 1970, 76 patented, 86 launched, 16 years later. These guys were not moving too fast over at Nestle. Now, when they brought it to market, they sold the thing as a complete solution. So it was machines plus coffee, and they were selling it into the channel or into sort of retail establishments, into the business. And the whole value positioning here was, hey, you don't need to think about a thing. We'll give you this machine. We'll give you the coffee. We'll price the whole thing at an all-in sales service support, all-in cost per cup. There you go. Turnkey solution. And it turns out, not too long after that, they acknowledged this ain't gonna fly. Nestle was kind of troubled. What are we gonna do with this? How does this not work? So 2 years later, they're kind of kicking it around and saying, it doesn't seem like we're solving a problem that the channel has. So even though we could make a great pod that has the right amount of air and coffee and water through our machines into good coffee, it's just not fitting. So what they did was they hired a guy by the name of Jean-Paul Gaillard, and he was named the commercial director. Now, the interesting thing about him, for all you folks who are sort of studying innovation, is that he did not suffer from sort of the bias of having been within the company for the last couple of years. He was fresh from the outside. So he came at it with fresh eyes. And then he did something that we call the pivot, which is he looked at this and said, you know, why are we beating our heads down in trying to sell this thing to somebody who doesn't really want it? What if we take this and turn it on its ear? What if we just sell the machines in one place and we sell the coffee someplace else? And we, instead of trying to sell it to restaurants and places that serve coffee, they don't really care, we go to consumers. What happens then? So what they did was they made the machines, you know, they outsourced the machines. So third-party service provider. We're not great at manufacturing hard goods. Doesn't make sense for us to be in this business. Okay. They sold them through independent retail stores. So we're going to go out to consumers, but we're going to sell them through independents. It has an air of sort of premium to it. The manufacturers took care of all of the machines, you know, delivery, stocking, et cetera. Nespresso took care of the sales and training. So they basically sent their team out on the road to make sure that everybody who was at an independent retail store knew what the machine was, what it did, how they should talk to the customer about it, and carry that message for them. What about the coffee? Well, they sold the coffee online and over the phone direct to members of the Nespresso clubs. They just created this club, this whole thing that said, if you got a machine, you're in the club automatically. Congratulations, you bought a machine, we're going to register it for you for a warranty program, and you are in the coffee club. Only way you can get coffee is by ordering it from us, direct. And then they delivered the coffee directly to somebody's home, usually within 24 hours. So it became part of their brand promise was that they were going to use the distribution angle here in order to delight somebody. And so what happened? Well, as this matured, they actually branched out and had more machines with different colors and different sizes and a few different options that were manufactured, again, by third parties. So they didn't get into the manufacturing business, but they grew a category around this. They added their own retail boutiques. So they were able to, again, go through and even have tighter control over the messaging and the sales piece that went around this. And they created the pro channel that would service the office market. So they had caught on enough with consumers that it seemed that there was a secondary and adjacent market through offices that now had sort of sprung up. So when we stack all that up, how'd they do? 12 million machines, pretty good for something they were going to write off. 20 billion capsules, 50 countries, 30% growth year over year over a 10-year period. And all of that resulted in $3 billion in annual revenue from something that they were going to write off as a complete failure 16, 18 years after inventing it. So really goes to illustrate that all of those four elements of the 4 Ps need to be intertwined together, and the decisions that you make around how you get your product to customer and what elements of that channel are very important. And with that, I will take questions. Anything online, Carrie?
I will check.
All right. Anything over here?
Oh, we got one coming.
Great. Yeah, we've got 2 microphones on the sides here.
Oh, hi, Ryan. Question on your last case study on the espresso about, sorry, first of all, I can't speak properly. I have a TMJ, okay. So be patient with me. I just wonder, how did L'Espresso initially found out that they were targeting the wrong market segment, that they were targeting the coffee shop and the restaurant? How did they find out that they should instead target the consumers?
So really, the way the case study sort of plays out, after spending 2 years of spending a lot of resources and tweaking everything that they thought they possibly could with going to the store owners and the coffee shops, it really did not translate into sales and traction. So, you know, the market is really good about telling you you've made a mistake. They just stop giving you money. And then you kind of figure out, I can keep doing this and go out of business, or we can figure out a better way to do it. And so I think, you know, the answer to your question is that they tried very hard with a lot of resources to give it a fair opportunity to take off, and it just didn't fly. And so As I'd said, it wasn't until somebody from outside the company took a fresh look at it, who wasn't biased by all of the history, that they turned around and decided, okay, there's another place for us to try this. Great, thanks. One more over here. I haven't.
Hi, Ryan. By the way, Ryan was my first entry into Mars, and now I'm part of the Upstart stuff. So thanks for your role in that.
Congratulations to you, sir.
But my question actually goes back on the, let's go back to the Nespresso thing. Unfortunately, I also have to like coffee, and I was shopping for a while for that. And when you talk about the guy that came in and turned it around, to what extent was it that, and to what extent was it external pressures? Because I don't even know if Nespresso turned it around until they were already catching up to other guys like Tassimo. And I mean, they seem to be doing very well, but I'm just wondering if this was something where they had this and they didn't really know what to do with it, and all of a sudden things started changing around them, and all of a sudden they had their own thing. Is there anything unique that they're doing that is helping them to maintain their position while all this other stuff is happening around them? I'm just trying to think of like the competitive environment, right? I had never heard about Nespresso until I'd heard about Tassimo, Keurig, and the rest.
Right.
as
So,
well.
so maybe a fair comment to sort of say that Nestle is sort of based over in Europe, and a lot of where their early sort of failures were, and then subsequently their early traction, was European-based and eventually made its way over to North America. In terms of your question of, what are the nuances on their decision-making, to be honest, I don't have insight into sort of saying beyond, beyond what we're trying to illustrate here. This was an example of...
I was just meaning if there was something we could generalize out of that.
Yeah. So generalizing out of that, I think, and tying back to sort of the first question, the case study is meant to sort of illustrate the implications that distribution and the choices you make, and how distribution wasn't the only thing they changed. They changed, a little bit about the product and a little bit about this, but it was like the central core was we're going to go at a different customer segment. Then we're going to separate out the coffee and the machines. And the distribution aspect of the fact there was some exclusivity around where you could get the coffee, it wasn't just one down the street, you had to be part of the club, allowed them to build relationships with consumers, which then fostered loyalty, which then created more of an ambassadorship from their consumers to go out and recommend, which caused them to increase sales and drive this. Now, they built the category. As I said, they invented this in 1970, it was patented, et cetera. The rest of the Tassimos and the whatnot have come along sort of in their wake. In North America, I think they were certainly not out in front, for years and years before there was other competition. I think, it's become a almost mature category now with a number of entrants in it and other people in and around the coffee space that have expanded into this home market. So, does that help? Great. Hi.
Hi. When you were talking about default choices and price, if you talk about expense, you can go probably two different ways. One, actually using this case, if you're the first in the market and you're the only one, there is the expensive because you are it, versus, let's take the Ferrari, where, yeah, you can buy a car, but there isn't anything like a Ferrari, so you've got the snob appeal. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference in terms of direct, indirect channels and things like that if you've got expensive price but defined in two different ways? Mm-hmm.
I think your first example of expensive was around your costs in raising awareness and building a category to some extent, right?
If you're the only one in the market, then, as they were back then.
Right. So I think, I think that price, where price kind of comes into play here is that if there's a higher price point on your product, then you have more ability to explore options that look like different distribution options. So, for instance, a Ferrari has such a high price point that there is ability for a lot of different touch points along the way for them to be indirect so that everybody can ensure that they're adding value throughout the chain. Where price is sort of on the lower end or lower price point, there's not always that ability to have multiple touches throughout the value chain and still have margin left over in order to build your business.
Okay. And the other question I have, is there a case out there that's brand new that has brought in a totally new distribution model from the three that you gave, plus this one here, that is somewhat different than the Amazon, Dell, Apple, and Nespresso?
New distribution model. So you have sort of co-producing folks that, we license our technology, you produce it in the market and whatnot. You have, new is I guess, tough to pinpoint based on sort of the level that we've set here of sort of basic introduction. So I'm reticent to sort of proclaim something as new because it might be a little bit beyond the scope of here, but I don't know that it's necessarily new.
Hi. Could you share a little more on the pricing structure for the product that we are going to sell directly as well as indirectly? How would you structure the pricing?
So pricing, that's a question that can only be answered by it all depends, which is really not all that useful other than to say, your mileage may vary, and it really kind of is dependent on the market that you're in, the product that you have, the value you're adding, the competitive landscape of it, the substitutive products. There's a whole bunch of variables that go into that. I will tell you sort of, in looking at price, there's a couple of different ways to do it. First one is sort of bottom up. So you think about what does this thing cost you to produce it? And your price needs to, taking all of the costs to physically, if it's a physical product, have it produced and put through a distribution channel to be where it's available for sale, all of those costs, If it's something that's, very easy for me to make in an offshore market, but I lose my shirt on the transportation of it and I can't sell it for I can't make money on it, then you need to take that into account. So there's a bottom up that says there has to be a cost and the ability for you to sell that with enough left over that is your margin, right? The other aspect of pricing is taking a look at the value that you're driving to consumers versus, or your customers, versus what they could get from something else. So if there are substitutive products that are out there, if there are competitors that have an offering in the exact same space, there's an element of price that the market has already told you this is what we're willing to bear. If all of a sudden, people started, the market for a pencil sort of is known. It's a commoditized kind of item. We've got enough data points. Somebody come out with a $35 pencil, it better have some really interesting attributes to it. Otherwise, it really is not going to sell because the expectation and market has sort of said, we're not really willing to spend $35 for a pencil. As a general rule, I can find a pencil somewhere else that meets my needs. So those are really, you have to understand the costs and really from the bottom up and make sure that there is, enough margin left in this sale when you sell it to your customer, and have to set your price point so that you don't, break even or lose on every sale because you'll go out of business very fast. But there's also an element of what will the market bear, what are your customers telling you that they're willing to pay based on the bundle of value that you're delivering for them.
I actually just thought, we'll take one more question because I see people are keen to go outside, so it'll be like a Friday at school when it's really hot and the teacher will let us out early. I just thought of a new distribution model that I just heard of. There's a new company in the US that's selling razors by mail. So you know how when you go into like Shoppers Drug Mart, razors are ridiculously expensive. It's like $20 for like a couple months. So they're going to undercut them and you basically pay much less, like $5 or something a month, and they ship you out very simple razors. Nobody needs like 6 blades and built-in foam and just getting rid of all the extra frills and the extra cost and making it really convenient so that you have a couple new razors every month for. So I just thought that was an interesting, and it's been invested in by VCs because they think it's going to take off.
That is a good one, and actually that triggered another one. Netflix was an interesting change in distribution model. Okay, so back when they were doing DVDs, you put a wish list online for us. We ship you the first 3. We don't ship you another one until you ship it back to us. It's kind of a play on mail order, but it's a completely different dynamic within that to sort of say it's a draw on demand. And there's a pretty big, level of customer lock-in there because you've given them as a consumer, here are the things that I want to watch. So they know that you've got a wish list, and as long as they keep that sort of cycle going of in and out, you're going to continue to be a customer and continue to use their services. So that was a bit of a shift on the old kind of mail order kind of world. Hi.
Hi. So I've got a product I want to sell online. I have heard of these distribution houses. which will, much like an external manufacturer will handle manufacturing, they'll handle the distribution for you. They'll ship directly to the customer. And I wonder if you can provide any sort of insight on that, any detail. Like, for example, will they deal with small customers, me being the customer, and what sort of pricing would they take? Yeah, so.
So there are pick and pack places that basically you would create, ship your inventory to someplace else that would do warehousing for you. You'd keep sort of small amounts of inventory on hand, and then as you sold something through the website, the order would go to them. They would pull it off the shelf, package it all up, and send it out for flat fees, generally for a flat fee kind of on a shipping kind of deal. And in some places, you can get sort of the stocking and the listing part. Yeah, I can't comment on sort of range, but you do the math on that as an outsource provider versus creating all that infrastructure, hiring all those people yourself. And generally speaking, it comes out fairly good if you're at sort of low volumes. As soon as your business ramps and you need to manage your own incoming supply and inventory fulfillment needs because it's just going sort of large and you can't rely anymore on a fraction of somebody's bandwidth in order to do this, then you would sort of look at moving it more to an in-house when it made sense for you to invest in all that infrastructure.
What are some of the companies that actually do that?
So if you take a look, Amazon Store. So Amazon has its own direct, but if you go online and you want to buy something and you say, oh, this is brought to you by ABC Corp in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What they do is they actually have an entire back end where they take all this merchandise and they will do the picking and packing the same way they would for their own product for stores that are set up where the product gets shipped there and they do fulfillment, order fulfillment stuff that it's called. So if you start poking around sort of the Amazon world, you should be able to find competitors of Amazon that do back end store fulfillment, and that'll lead you. I know there's a couple that are in and around Toronto that are smaller. If you don't want to go into the Amazon kind of space, you just want to start small. There's a couple places in Markham. I don't remember their names, but generally places that do things like print and production, mass kind of volumes print and production. Sometimes they have inventory warehousing or inventory management solutions as well, and small shops that would be able to sort of start you out, and you can kind of feel your way around it and figure out if they're going to meet your needs as you grow, or you need to kind of move into something else.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Ryan for your great presentation.
Thank you.